everybody. Welcome back to our Grow Along. This is our Thursday edition. And before I welcome our guest to you today, which is Lisa, and you're going to be super encouraged by her talk today. But before we get there, I want to know who is here just to make sure that we are on. You guys can hear. We're not doing anything crazy in the background. We need to know y'all can hear us. So if you are live, will you just let us know in the comments? And just for fun, tell us if you have been on any of the previous lives this week, because I want to know who our repeat offenders are. It's just kind of fun to figure that out. Okay, so I'm not seeing any comments. I am assuming that we are live, but maybe not. Let me just check the Facebook page. Lisa, do you have the page pulled up?
I'll pull it up on my phone.
Okay, I just want to make sure because I'm not seeing any comments yet. So, you guys, if you're out there, please let us know. We don't see anybody. And Lisa is really too good to miss. So I don't want to start if we are not actually live.
Okay, I don't see anything right now.
Okay. Maybe we are not live yet. Okay, I'm seeing something, but I'm not seeing anybody here. Okay, so I just think maybe there's a delay. It looks like there's a delay. Okay, we're going to act as if we are live and there's an audience out there, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So Lisa, will you just share a little bit about yourself, because some of our listeners may not know you.
Yes. Thank you for having me today. I write mostly about finding hope in the hard and deepening your faith in grief. But I have been homeschooling. I know we're going to talk about that today. Mm-hmm. I've been home educating for over 20 years. I've launched 5 so far into college, and I have 2 more that I'm homeschooling. So I have been in the trenches for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. I can't believe 5. So are they all now out of the home?
No. So the 5, I have one who is in college, and he came back with all of this because, in fact, that was our first indication that something was changing. He never went back after spring break.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, that is, my hats are off to you, all the hats in my closet, because that is really something. I just admire you so much for that. So what made you, there's so much to your story we're going to get into, but I first just want to ask, what made you first get into homeschooling? Because a lot of us now are kind of reluctant homeschoolers, and we are being forced into this. Literally millions of people across the world are now schooling at home. And it was probably a little bit different for you, but what made you choose to homeschool?
It was not something I started out to do. I didn't start out to have 7 children. My husband wanted 2. I was like, let's do 3. I thought I would work. I was an attorney. I thought I would always work at least part-time. And my older 2 had started in school. They went to kindergarten, first grade. But by that time, we had 5 children. And I just began to look at we were in a good school system, but I began to really evaluate what was out there, and what I kind of looked at the long term. I began to evaluate my end goal. What did I want for my children at the end? And I just had met some homeschooling families and just really liked what I saw that they were able to do with their kids. So honestly, it was a huge leap, and I didn't know if I was cut out for it. I told my husband, you're going to have to every day by 5 o'clock. I was used to being home with my kids. I mean, I had been staying home with them by that point, but I was not used to homeschooling them. So I thought I was going to be a crazy woman by 5 o'clock every day. But God is gracious, and He teaches us, how to do it.
Yes. Okay. So before we get really far into the meat of your story, I just kind of want you to go back to those beginning days. And if you remember them, I don't know if you do or not, but can you tell us a little bit about how those early days were? Because a lot of us are kind of there now.
Yes. Homeschooling and doing this schooling at home are not one and the same. And my heart just goes out to these parents who are trying to recreate the classroom in their home, and they're uploading and downloading and checking and doing work that really doing somebody else's lesson plans.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, homeschooling is different. There's a more free schedule to it. You can still accomplish the same amount of work, but the rhythms are different. And you learn, you can choose a curriculum, so you can figure out what works for your child, what works for your teaching style, what, how you want the day to look. So, but in those early days, there is also, when you pull a child out of school and bring them home, they're used to the stimulation and the activity and the things that go on in the classroom. And there's that transition. And these kids have been brought home abruptly. Nobody asked for this. Nobody wanted to do this. And so it's abrupt for the parent, it's abrupt for the child, and that's normal. It's going to create, normally you would have a lot of season of transition, and, we just don't have that margin. We just have to, parents are having to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like literally over the weekend, we're all of a sudden having to figure out how to get online and figure Google Classroom out. And the teachers are too. I mean, everybody, it's been crazy for everybody. So, but you have such a story of homeschool as a redemptive element in your family, in the life of your family. So can you tell us a little bit about the tragedy that first off marked your family, and then we'll talk about how homeschool was a sweet place for you all during that time?
Yes. We were about 8 years ago. I was a mom of 7. I had not practiced law in a long time. I was home and busy, as you can imagine. It was summer. In fact, it was Father's Day weekend. And, life was full. It was not perfect. It was not struggle-free at all, but it was good and everything I had wanted it to be. And on a very normal, typical night, I said goodnight to my husband. He was staying up to do some work for his mom. And he said, I'll be in there in a minute. I said, okay. Good night. And somewhere in the dark, early morning hours, I didn't wake fully up, but I woke up to his funny breathing. And in my, half asleep, half awake state, I just thought it was a nightmare. And so I kind of nudged him and said, it's just a nightmare. You'll be okay. And I thought that he would turn over and we'd both go back to sleep. I say we all because my 4-year-old always would come down and crawl in between us. And so she was per usual in between us. He didn't. And I woke up enough to realize that this was not a nightmare that he was having. And I flipped on the overhead light. And I could see immediately that something was very wrong. And, the short story is we called 911. We did CPR. The medics came. They're right outside my neighborhood. They were there so quickly. And I thought, he's going to be so mad when he wakes up and realizes he can't go to work. And there were some good signs there. But when I got to the ER, I went into that room that you never want to go in. And a very kind doctor told me very gently that they had worked on Dan for over an hour and they had never been able to revive him. So there we were, like overnight on a dime, just, different circumstances. But life, we have all realized life can change on a dime. On a dime. Things that we thought would happen, plans that we counted on, things that were kind of anchoring us and holding us, those can change. We don't always get notice.
Right. So walk us through like those first few days and weeks. What was your lifeline? How did you hang on? Because a loss like that is something that, nobody can understand it until you actually walk the path. But I imagine that you're just putting one foot in front of the other. You're just surviving. How did you just cling to Christ and find a refuge during those first days of transition?
That is exactly it. You are putting one foot in front of the other. And I think because I had kids at home, I remember saying to myself, they have lost one parent. They cannot lose two. And so I had to get feet to floor. I had to show up well. I had to be present. And of course, I didn't like plaster on a smile. We were all grieving together, and it was very organic. And we talked about the hard questions, and we wept together, and we, grieved together. But it's in those times, we teach our kids about, God is faithful. We've read about it. We've studied it. We've memorized those verses. But in those times where the life just falls apart and the rug is pulled out from under you, and you are just, knowing that it's God alone that is holding you, it's an opportunity to see God fulfill those promises that we've always known. And we probably saw them. I had seen God work in my life. I had seen his provision. He had given me wisdom. I had seen miracles. But nothing like that season where I was utterly dependent. And if God didn't do it, I wasn't going to be able to parent. I didn't know how I was going to get teen boys raised. I had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old at that point who would have very few memories of their dad. Financially, we were looking at very different circumstances. God has been so faithful in 1,000 ways. He is.
And that's one of the things that really drew me to your blog, Lisa, is because you reflect that depth of walking through the fire and still being able to say the Lord is faithful, and such hope that offers. It's not a flippant statement. No. It's not a churchy statement for you. It's a real experience. And I love that. And I would encourage those who may be listening who needs that hope, go read some of the articles that Lisa has on her site, because she writes from that experiential, is that a word? Experiential, yeah. Of really living it. And we need that. We need to see that. So Lisa, having walked through crisis, what would you say was the blessing of homeschooling in particular during that time?
I didn't know any other experience, so I don't know what it would have been like to be able to send my children off at school, but I was grateful because that was June when Dan passed away. I honestly didn't know if I would be able to homeschool. When you experience that kind of loss or go through a crisis, all your energy, your emotions, your brain space, your physical, all is going to process in healing. And people may sense that now. People may sense that, why am I so tired? Why am I? It's because we're all processing emotion and massive change and unexpected circumstances. And that takes up space that we weren't doing before, 2 months ago.
Right.
But I had two friends who specifically were praying for me to be able to homeschool. And I appreciated being able to continue to go through the grief together. Like, we were all on the same page. I wasn't sending them out. They weren't going off to somebody who was who didn't know their story, who expected things of them that they maybe, couldn't do. I was very specific in choosing like read aloud books about children who had lost a parent. It wasn't in the story, but they didn't have a parent, and yet they were thriving. Things like 5 Little Peppers and How They Grew. The story of the Von Trapp family singers. Just the real book. I was very specific in picking books at all levels. My children didn't even know that, about families that were going through difficulty and were doing well. And we needed those times together. We needed like Bible time together every morning. We were very specific in what we studied.
Right.
So
right.
Very grateful for the time.
Yeah. And it sounds like the Lord just gave you wisdom to know what to bring into your homeschool and how to choose those resources that were the most helpful at that time. That's really incredible. So how did your kids, were they always open to homeschool, or how did they see it?
No. So I laugh at that. Even now, I get a little pushback from my older ones because
Really?
some of them never experienced school, and so they wonder. I mean, they're doing very well. The 5 who have launched have gotten into the college they want. They've gotten scholarships. They're doing well in their professions. And so part of me just kind of chuckles inside just because I went to school. I know that it's not always green on the other side. There is no perfect educational situation. We have to figure out what works for our children and our family. But my youngest 2 would dearly love to school. They love to go to school. They want to ride on a school bus. They want to have lunch with friends. They see it as a big social scene. And then I think when we transitioned to home, there was my older 2 who had been in the classroom really missed that. They missed having friends, having that classroom, have all of that. But once we were home, I think for the large part of it, we were so busy. I mean, there are so many things to be doing. And that's another thing that parents, this is not really a true picture of homeschooling because it's not for me either. We're not doing any field trips. We're not doing any clubs. We're not doing any, none of that is taking place.
Right.
So, yeah, I think, as a parent, my husband and I said, this is what we've decided for our family. We were never like, whatever you guys want. We took into consideration what they wanted and how they felt about it. But we pretty much knew that until God told us different, that we needed to do the last thing he told us, which was school at home.
Yeah, that's some pretty good advice just across the board, I think, too. I've used that many times. So I want to encourage everybody to drop your questions in the comments because Lisa is happy to answer any specific questions you have. In the meantime, while we're waiting on some questions, Lisa, you shared 5 tips. I got an email a couple weeks ago with 5 tips, and I saw it kind of as a crash course for those who are new to this schooling at home situation. So do you mind sharing some of those tips with us?
Sure. I had to go back and remember what they were. But the first thing is to choose routine over schedule. And this is something that I had to learn the hard way. I remember one time setting up this big graph. I had kids on this, time slots on this end and children on this end. And I was going to be doing, no 2 days are the same. When we're home this stretch, no 2 days are going to be the same. And so set up a routine, an order, a flow so that your kids can kind of know what to expect, but most of us will do better if we don't hold to strict time. So sometimes our kids are logging on and logging off to certain classes. So yes, that's going to happen. But if you're doing the majority of work at home and then uploading it at the end of the day or the week, set up a routine and let your kids know. You can even write it on a whiteboard or put it on a piece of paper. But, if your boys get wiggly, if everybody needs to stop and take a lunch break, if brain space is shut down and we need to regroup, feel the freedom to do that.
So basically keep our expectations a little more in line with reality and not
exactly
to have a classroom setting. Okay, that's good. All right. So what's next?
Yeah. And okay, so the second one is this was very important for me. I did not start off doing this, but you have an opportunity with your children at home that you might not have when you're rushing everybody out the door for school. And that is you can start your day with, and I would just, if you can do one during this time, I would just encourage you to do this. It doesn't have to be elaborate. You can open up the Bible. You can start in a book. You can have a devotional that you do together. You can do something online. It can be as simple as reading one verse and praying together for somebody in the family. But sit everybody in your living room and open the Bible. You to feel comfortable doing it. But I think what I wrote in my post was when you look back 10 years from now at this season, you're going to remember those times. Those times you sat together as a family and did Bible together are going to be so special to you. and you have to fight for it because the enemy's going to want that time. And so, your phone's going to ring and things are going to you're going to want to move on to math, but fight for that time. And then the third thing was, this is your sanity saver. After lunch, I would encourage you to take an hour of quiet time, reading time for everybody. Just find a space in your home. If everybody has a room or a quiet corner, out on the front porch, wherever it is, even in your minivan, that's where I go. Find a quiet space for everybody so that everybody is either reading for an hour or sleeping for an hour. They can listen to a book on tape. They can play with Legos where they're listening to the book, but no questions from mom. Don't get up and ask for water. Don't, this is time for everybody just to think their own thoughts. And moms and dads need this, right? I think my fourth was keep your own chocolate stash hidden.
Love that.
And tongue in cheek, whatever works for you. It might be coffee. It might be your daily Diet Coke. Whatever works for you. You need to have a little, for me, it is dark chocolate, because when I just want to kind of bang my head, even after all these years, when I have taught a lesson, for the fourth time on the same math thing, and we're getting there, but it has taken all of stretched me. I just need to go have some dark chocolate. So, and the last thing I would say is that your house is going to look different now. So yes, when you talked about changing our expectations, your house is holding so much life right now. You're not getting up in the morning, everybody going out and then coming in at 5 o'clock or 3 o'clock. It's 24 hours, 24/7. Your house is being lived in, and it's just going to look different now. So do some morning tours, school well, play, pick up in the evening, but just for our own mind, we need to say, it's not going to be magazine. It's not like it usually is. I might get back to that. But for right now, having my beds made, having the kitchen cleaned up is what matters most. And I'm going to focus on that. And then, we're going to live here. We're going to live here.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are some really good points. I see someone asking a question in the comments, and you touched on the quiet time in the afternoon, but you might have a different answer for this one. Her question is how to find time for herself, especially for that one-on-one time with God, with everybody around all the time. Is that something you did in those afternoon hours, or how did you carve time out for that?
When my kids were little, yes. When I had babies and toddlers, and you don't really have a morning because your evening, your night meetings go into the morning, that was my time. My kids are old, as my kids got older, then I was able to say, Mommy, I go to my minivan. So I can go in there, and they kind of know, like, they're going to come knock on my bedroom door, open it up. But I would say find a space, and even so on a daily basis, yes. What I do is I get my kids up in the morning. If you're not a morning person, you can get up before your kids do. If you're not a morning person, this is what I do. I get up, I get my kids going, I get them, breakfast is going, they're started on their chores. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to do my Bible time. I tell them I'm going to do my Bible time. And I'm out in my car for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And they're old enough now that they can handle that inside. And then I come back in, and I have to expect that everything's not going to have gone like clockwork while I was out in my car, but I come back in, and then we start our day together. Yeah. So, and the other thing I would say is, when we can't go anywhere, just give yourself a mom's night out at home. I've done that. I'm a single mom now. And there have been a lot of times where I'm like, I'm going to have a mom's night out at home tonight, guys. And they're all for it. So I'll just kind of at some point in the evening, close my door, put my candles on, watch something, or, whatever I want to do to just refill.
I love that. As you're talking, I was reminded of Susanna Wesley, who used to put her apron over her head, sit in the middle of the kitchen, put her apron over her head. And when her kids saw that, they knew, don't mess with mom. She's having her little prayer time with Jesus. And I don't know how often she did it. I imagine it was probably a few times every day, obviously. But we all need our space, and we can let our kids know, when I'm in my minivan or when I'm in this space or situation, this is my time that I'm meeting with the Lord. So please, give me that space to do that. And we need it. It's okay. We need to give ourselves permission to have that too. So I love your minivan.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing a lot of good comments. Jessie says she's not a morning person. I can relate. I used to be, but it's actually getting harder for me as I get older. I don't know why.
Yeah. I'm a night person.
Yeah. And that's okay. I used to feel guilty about changing, but it is what it is. Ashley says, I do the same. I call Bible time for all. There is a timer going. That's a good idea too, to use a timer. Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah. I love that. And then let's see. We may have another question up here that I forgot to read. Let's see. Okay. Leah, her comment, she says, I feel like I'm failing in this homeschooling journey that God has led us on, because I'm so introverted and deal with anxiety and have very hard time getting out with my kids. Do you have anything to say to that, Lisa?
Yeah. Leah, are you homeschooling just for this season, or are you have you been doing this for the year, for a couple of years?
Yeah, she says prior to the pandemic. So she was already doing this.
I think as a rule, we need to be okay with the way God has made us. We can look at other moms and be like, she is such a crafty mom, or she like gets in there and does science with her kids, or she's going and has her kids in all these activities, or we're not ever going to be all those other moms. We're going to be the way God wired us, and there are weaknesses in that, and there are strengths in that. And so I know that God has given you strength that you are able to pour into your children. And then, if you sense that your children want more time outside, or that maybe that's something that you can give them, just make one course. You can course correct anytime. And so you don't have to wait till next year. You can be like, well, let's just on Tuesdays, let's do a park day. Or I would be really okay with a couple friends, but not a huge group. Figure out what works for you and works for your family, because it's not going to be sustainable and long term unless it works for you as the mom and for your kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that, Lisa. You gave so many wise suggestions right there in that one little blurb. That was so good. Thank you. And Leah, yes, I hope that helps. You do have gifts, and just remember that. Focus on that. Focus on the things that the Lord has given you to pour into those children He's given you too. Don't be discouraged. Nicole says, any words of wisdom to tell a child that doesn't want to give you alone time? I'm maybe thinking this is a younger child, Nicole. She says, we're going through a difficult time right now, divorce, new home, new school, etc. And my son, 6-year-old, yes, so he is young, is really struggling with anxiety and separation. He tells me that I don't love him when I want to spend time alone or make him try to do something on his own. How can I explain to him that it's okay for me to do things for myself and he'll be okay? That's a really good question and a deep one. So Lisa, any word?
Just, not speaking as a counselor, but speaking as a fellow mom, I would say to tell yourself, it won't always be like this. Like, he may be really, really needy in this season, and he may be requiring more of you than he will require in a year. Yeah. And so that will help you cope with his neediness. But then I think you are doing well to encourage him to build up his resilience. It is painful to go through. That is a huge loss. That is a death to go through a divorce. And there are different ramifications than losing a parent and a divorce. They have different ramifications, but a lot of similarities. In fact, I often thought about my one friend who had gone through it. I'd walked with her through her divorce, and she was doing so well with her boys. And I just was such hope for me because I had watched her walk that place of grief. So I would say, find little ways to help him, even if it's 15 minutes playing Legos, or 15 minutes in his room listening to a book on tape, or 50, if you can start small and go from there, and give him assurances that, maybe the timer is another good thing for him. But, setting up a routine, letting him know that you're right down the hall, and knowing that it's not always going to be like this, that as you process this, and as he processes and moves through these changes, he will likely get less needy.
Yeah. I agree with that. And Nicole, I just want to encourage you in your situation too, because you guys are all going through a really difficult time and transition, and just give yourself some grace too, because you're the shoulders right now that it's all fallen on. And I know that is tough. But as Lisa has shared, God's faithful, and you're going to get through this too with him by your side.
And Nicole, the only other thing I would add is, we can give you our advice, but God knows. God knows you. He knows your child more than we could ever. And so when I have been at those places where I just don't know, I don't know how to fix it, and I can't fix it, I have cried out to God, and I have seen him provide. And so I would do that. Take this opportunity to say, Lord, I can't, but we are your children, and and so give me wisdom. Help me know how to respond to them. Give me, maybe something or somebody who can step in to help. Whatever it is, he will give you that. As a promise, he will. James says that he will give us wisdom when we ask.
Yeah. Lisa, are there other scriptures that you have really clung to during, especially in those early days, that you could share with some of our listeners?
There were a lot. I was reading the Bible I was reading through the Bible in a year. I don't know if you've ever done that. Yes. So I was getting a lot of the word, and I needed it so desperately. It was just my food. And so every day God was meeting me wherever I was in the word. But there were certain passages. I think Psalm 27 was huge, especially at the end where it says, I would have lost heart had I not believed that I would see good in the land of the living.
Yes.
And then it says, wait for the Lord. And just such a promise to me. A lot of Psalm 18, where God talks about pulling us out of the pit and setting us on ground. There were a lot of scriptures. There's, in fact, I just wrote a short study on one in Jeremiah 17, 7-8, that talks about the tree that flourishes despite the drought, despite the wind, that this tree that has been planted by water will flourish. And it was such a picture to me of the hope that we have, if we will stay rooted and draw our nourishment from God.
I love that passage too. That's actually one of my favorites about trusting, because it says, blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. Yes. And it's just that tenacious holding to God's character and believing that he is bigger, he is stronger, that no matter what, our circumstances are not going to overtake us. We will not be consumed. And so I love that you are an example of just living that out and having come through a really difficult time that tested that. So I know we're at 35 minutes, and I told you this was going to be around 20. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but is there any last word of hope that you would share for those who are really experiencing a time of crisis? I know for some of us right now, it's not as hard as it is for others. Others of us are really devastated by what's going on. And so this is a time of real trauma in their lives. Is there any word of encouragement or a silver lining, even perhaps, that you would care to share with us?
In the weeks, months after Dan passed away, when I would get away by myself to do my quiet time, I would write at the top of my journal, like every day, in all caps, I cannot do this. This is too hard. And it was. And as I would write that, I would get this assurance that that was exactly where God wanted me to be. You know, we none of us want to be in the place where we are out of control, which is exactly where we find ourselves. We are not in control of the economy. There's a myth of control, and we've discovered that it was a myth, that we can't control our plans, our calendar, our time. I mean, my husband, when I think about this virus and the risk, he was in the bed next to me. He was not on an interstate and passed away. But God made us to be dependent on him. And he made us for a relationship of dependence. And we want to be independent. We want to, count on our bank account and count on our own inner strength and count on our own capabilities. But when all that is taken away and we have no choice but to trust God, we are in the exact place he wants us to be. And it is in that place where we have the opportunity, if we will open our eyes, to see God in ways that we would never see him on the other days. On the easy days and the days of comfort, we have an opportunity to see God be strength when we are weak and to do for us what we could never do for ourselves. And that is gold that we would never give back. None of us want this season. None of us want the economic ramifications and the difficulty and the death that we're seeing. Mm-hmm. But if we will mine the fruit that God has for us here, we will look back and say, I would not have chosen that. And I'm glad I don't get a choice, because your gifts were greater than your hard.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen. I love that. That reminds me of when the Israelites left Egypt and they went through that wilderness, and they ended up prolonging that, but God fed them manna. He fed them water from a rock. He did such miraculous things for them that they never would have experienced if they hadn't been in that season of the wilderness in the desert. And what they saw as deprivation, God was miraculously revealing himself to them. And I did a study once as I was reading through that Exodus period, of how many times God revealed himself like in a new way to them. Like he would say, I am the God who heals you. I am your banner. Like there's like 7 different ways. God revealed himself in so many different ways in the middle of that difficult time when they thought, we're all going to die. We're all going to perish. We're going to starve to death.
We want to go back. Take us back.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes we can do the same thing, and it's natural. I'm not saying like shame on us for, not embracing the hard necessarily, but if we could just ask the Lord to give us eyes to see what he's doing, and to really, like you said, just understand that we can't do it. But that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad place to be. So I love that, Lisa. And I know these ladies have, we've had another church service today over here in the comments. So it's so good. People are just praising the Lord. He is so good. I'm so grateful the Lord led me to this. Holy is the Lord. Thank you so much. Yes. Lisa, you're just a precious sister in Christ. And we're so thankful for you. We're thankful that you have clung to the Lord when you needed to, because your example is now showing us how we can walk a difficult path in our own lives. And so I'm just so blessed by you. I thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. Can you tell everybody where they can find you? They want to be able to do that after we get off.
Sure. You can find me at lisaappelo.com. It's Appelo. And I would love to see you there. I'm on Instagram under that same name, and Facebook. It's under True and Faithful. You probably can find it under Lisa Appelo or True and Faithful. Mm-hmm. But I would love to see you there.
Yes. And
Thank you.
do
I
have a
enjoyed
new,
being with you today.
yes. And you do have that new study too, right? Is that
I
on your
do.
website as well? Okay, good.
I do. This is probably going to show up backwards. Oh, it didn't. Good.
Yeah, that's good.
This is something I actually wrote just for this season. It's short. It would only take you a week, 4 or 5 days, but you can print it out or do it on your device. And it walks you through that Jeremiah 17, 7 through 8 passage.
I love that. I love it. Okay.
Like very practical steps.
Yeah. So you guys, I'm going to leave her link in the comments, and y'all please go check that out and grab that study. That would be a blessing for all of us to do that. So, all right. Thank you again for joining me, Lisa. And thanks everybody for being here.
All right.
Bye.